The champagne glass slipped from Marcus Hale's hand and shattered beside the woman's feet. But nobody looked at the broken glass. Everyone was staring at the woman standing beneath the hotel chandelier, her old brown coat soaked from the rain, her shoes covered in mud, and a faded canvas bag hanging from one shoulder. Victoria Grant, the hotel owner's daughter, pointed toward the exit. "You were warned. People like you don't belong at an event like this." The woman didn't argue. She simply reached into her bag and touched something hidden beneath an old notebook. Victoria smiled. "Security will remove you now." Then the ballroom doors opened. A billionaire walked in. He stopped after seeing the woman's face. His expression changed instantly. "Wait!" The entire room went silent. The billionaire walked toward her, staring at the tiny silver symbol attached to her bag. Then he whispered words that made Victoria's smile disappear. "Where did you get that?" The woman looked down at the symbol. "I've carried it for 22 years. The billionaire's face turned pale. "Then you are the woman I've been searching for." Her name was Elena Carter. She was 60 years old, though the exhaustion in her eyes sometimes made her look older. That evening, she had arrived at the Grand Belmont Hotel because she had been personally invited to the Charity Foundation's annual medical gala. She had not arrived in a limousine. She had not worn diamonds. She had not brought an assistant. She had taken 2 buses through heavy rain and walked the final 6 blocks because the traffic had stopped completely. Inside the hotel, hundreds of wealthy guests were celebrating the foundation's latest medical achievement. Elena stood quietly near the entrance, holding her invitation. The receptionist had barely looked at it. Instead, she had looked at Elena's coat, then her shoes, then the canvas bag. "Are you sure this is the right event?" the receptionist asked. Elena smiled politely. "Yes, Dr. Samuel Brooks invited me." The receptionist hesitated. Before she could answer, Victoria Grant appeared. Victoria was 38, elegant, confident, and accustomed to deciding who deserved attention. She looked Elena up and down. Then she smiled. "You should probably leave before this becomes embarrassing." Elena simply asked one question. "Why?" Victoria's answer was immediate. "Because everyone here belongs." Elena looked around the ballroom. Doctors were laughing beside politicians. Corporate executives were shaking hands with investors. A famous surgeon stood beneath a giant screen displaying the foundation's newest medical breakthrough. Everyone appeared important. Everyone except her. Elena quietly unfolded her invitation. "Please check the guest list." Victoria didn't even take it. "I already know who was invited." "Then you know my name." Victoria's expression hardened. "We don't need to make this difficult." "I'm not." "You arrived wearing a coat that looks like it came from a shelter." Several nearby guests heard that. One woman glanced at Elena and quickly looked away. A man whispered something to his wife. Elena heard him say, "Probably wandered in." She didn't react. Victoria stepped closer. "This is a private charity event." Elena nodded. "I know. So why are you still standing here?" "Because I was invited." Victoria laughed softly. "By whom?" "Dr. Samuel Brooks." Victoria's smile disappeared for half a second. Then it returned. "Dr. Brooks isn't here yet. I can wait." Victoria folded her arms. "Not inside." A security officer named Daniel Price approached after Victoria called him. He was 51 and had worked at the hotel for almost 15 years. Daniel looked at Elena, then at Victoria. "What seems to be the problem?" Victoria answered immediately. "She refuses to leave." Elena corrected her calmly. "I've only asked them to verify my invitation." Daniel looked at the card. "May I?" Elena handed it to him. Daniel read the name. Elena Carter, guest of Dr. Samuel Brooks. Table 17. His eyebrows lifted slightly. "She's listed." Victoria interrupted. "That doesn't prove anything. Someone could have copied the name." Daniel looked at the electronic guest system. "I can check." Victoria's voice became colder. "There's no need." Daniel paused. That sentence bothered him. If Elena truly wasn't invited, Why not let him verify it? He looked at the receptionist. Check the system. The young receptionist's fingers moved toward the tablet. Victoria stopped her. Don't. The room became quieter. Elena noticed. Daniel noticed too. And for the first time, he began wondering whether the person causing trouble wasn't the woman in the old coat. Elena stepped back. She didn't want Daniel to lose his job. I'll wait outside until Dr. Brooks arrives. Victoria smiled. That's better. Elena turned toward the doors. Then her canvas bag slipped slightly from her shoulder. An old leather notebook became visible inside. Victoria noticed it. What's that? Nothing important. Victoria laughed. Of course. Elena adjusted the bag. Inside the notebook were hundreds of handwritten pages. Research notes, medical calculations, laboratory observations, names, dates, and one diagram that had changed the lives of thousands of patients. But Elena wasn't carrying it to impress anyone. She had carried it for 22 years because it was the only surviving original record of work that had been stolen from her. Near the notebook was a sealed envelope, and attached to the bag was a tiny silver pin. 2 intersecting lines inside a circle. It looked meaningless. To almost everyone. Elena touched it briefly. She remembered another building. Another rainy night. Another time when people had told her she didn't belong. That night had cost her career. This night was about to cost someone else much more. Victoria was becoming impatient. The charity gala was only minutes away from beginning. Important investors were arriving. She didn't want Elena standing near the entrance. Daniel, remove her. Daniel hesitated. Ma'am, I think we should wait for Dr. Brooks. Victoria looked at him. Do you want to explain to the owner why you ignored my instructions? Daniel said nothing. Elena finally spoke. It's okay. She turned toward the door. Then Victoria picked up a glass from a passing server. Nobody expected what happened next. Victoria walked toward Elena. Before you go. Elena turned. Victoria tipped the glass. Cold red punch poured across Elena's coat. It soaked through the fabric. It ran down her sleeves. A few drops splashed onto the floor. The ballroom went silent. Victoria smiled. Now you really look like you don't belong. Elena looked down at her ruined coat. Then she looked at the leather notebook inside her bag. Her first concern was not herself. She opened the bag. The notebook was dry. Only then did she close it again. Victoria laughed. Still protecting that old thing? Elena looked at her. You have no idea what it contains. Victoria shrugged. Neither does anyone here. She was wrong. Someone was about to recognize it. The ballroom doors opened. A group of executives entered first. Then came Adrian Cole. At 49, Adrian was one of the wealthiest healthcare investors in the country. The foundation had spent months preparing for his arrival. His company was considering a billion-dollar partnership. Everyone turned toward him. Everyone except Elena. She was still standing near the entrance. Adrian took 3 steps into the ballroom. Then he saw the silver pin. He stopped. His assistant nearly walked into him. Mr. Cole? Adrian didn't answer. His eyes remained fixed on the tiny symbol attached to Elena's canvas bag. He had seen it before. 22 years earlier. He had been 27 then. A sudden blood disorder had nearly killed him. Doctors had tried 3 treatments. Nothing worked. Then a young researcher gave his doctors an experimental protocol. The treatment saved his life. Adrian had spent decades trying to discover who created it. The official records gave credit to a famous medical director. But Adrian never believed that story. Because one doctor had secretly told him something. The person who designed it was never given credit. Adrian had searched for years. And now that symbol was standing in front of him. He walked toward Elena. Adrian stopped less than 10 feet from Elena. He pointed toward the silver pin. Where did you get that? Elena looked down. Her expression changed. Why? Adrian's voice became quieter. Please. Elena touched the symbol. It belonged to our research team. Adrian froze. Our? There were 6 of us. What research team? Elena studied his face. Then she noticed something familiar. The scar beneath his collar. The same scar she remembered from an old hospital photograph. You were patient 14. Adrian's face went completely still. Nobody understood. Victoria stepped forward. Mr. Cole, this woman has caused a misunderstanding. Adrian ignored her. He looked only at Elena. You know about patient 14? I wrote the protocol. The room seemed to stop breathing. Adrian whispered, Impossible. Elena shook her head. No. Impossible was what they told me when I said the official record was wrong. Adrian looked at the notebook. Is that the original? Elena nodded. Some of it. Adrian's eyes filled with disbelief. For 22 years he had searched for a name. He had found a woman standing in a ruined coat. And the foundation had just humiliated her. Adrian turned toward Victoria. What exactly happened? Victoria suddenly looked nervous. She entered without proper credentials. Adrian looked at the invitation in Elena's hand. She has an invitation. We weren't able to verify it. Did you check? Victoria hesitated. No. Adrian's expression hardened. Then how did you decide she wasn't invited? Victoria didn't answer. Adrian looked at Daniel. Did anyone check the guest list? Daniel shook his head. I tried. Who stopped you? Silence. Everyone knew the answer. Adrian turned back toward Elena. Did she pour that drink on you? Elena didn't answer immediately. Then she nodded. Adrian looked at the stain covering her coat. Something changed in his face. He had spent years imagining the person who saved his life. He had imagined someone honored, someone respected, someone remembered. Instead, he had found her being treated like an unwanted stranger. Adrian turned toward the ballroom. Do you know who this woman is? Nobody answered. He raised the silver pin. 22 years ago, this symbol belonged to the team that created the treatment that saved my life. The room erupted in whispers. Victoria's face went pale. Adrian asked Elena to open the notebook. She hesitated, not because she was afraid, because she knew what the pages represented. She opened it carefully. Page after page contained handwritten calculations. Adrian leaned closer. The third interval. Elena nodded. The timing was wrong in the published version. You changed it. I corrected it after patient 14. Adrian looked at her. That was me. I know. You knew. I remembered your chart. Adrian's eyes became wet. You saved my life. Elena shook her head. Your doctors trusted the protocol. But you created it. Elena closed the notebook. I did. A senior board member stood. Mr. Cole, this is a serious allegation. Adrian turned. An allegation? He pointed toward Elena. I have spent 22 years looking for her. The board member said nothing. Adrian continued. The treatment I received contained a timing adjustment that was never included in the public paper. Elena opened to a marked page. There it was. The exact adjustment. Written in blue ink. Signed with her initials. The room became silent. The woman they had treated as an intruder had just produced the original evidence behind the Foundation's greatest achievement. Victoria stepped backward. This doesn't prove she owns the research. Elena looked at her. No. Adrian turned. Then who does? A man near the stage answered. Dr. Richard Grant. Elena's eyes narrowed. Richard Grant didn't create it. He led the department. He approved funding. He was the director. Elena nodded. None of those things make someone the inventor. The Foundation's current president, Marcus Hale, approached. Dr. Carter, perhaps this conversation should happen privately. Elena laughed quietly. Privately? Marcus looked uncomfortable. You've been discussing my work privately for 22 years. Adrian looked at him. Why wasn't her name on the program? Marcus had no answer. The giant screen behind him displayed a photograph of Richard Grant. Beneath it were the words, the man who changed modern medicine. Elena stared at the screen. I remember that photograph. Marcus asked. From where? From the day they removed me from the laboratory. The room fell silent. Elena continued. I refused to sign a document giving him credit for my research. And then, they locked me out. Why didn't you sue? I tried. What happened? They had money. Her answer was simple and devastating. 22 years earlier, Elena had worked 16-hour days inside a small research laboratory. She had no famous surname, no wealthy family, no political connections. But she had something the others didn't. She understood the problem. The treatment itself worked. The delivery system didn't. Patients were receiving the medication too quickly. The resulting reaction was dangerous. Elena spent months testing different intervals. She filled notebooks with calculations. She stayed late after everyone left. Sometimes she slept in the laboratory. Then one night she discovered the answer. A small adjustment. A carefully timed stabilizer. A sequence nobody else had considered. The first trial succeeded. Then the second. Then the third. The research team celebrated. Richard Grant shook her hand. We changed medicine tonight. Elena smiled. She believed him. She didn't know that while she celebrated, he was already planning how to take credit. Weeks later, executives offered Elena a contract. Her name would be removed from the primary authorship position. Richard would become the public face. In exchange, Elena would receive a promotion. She refused. That decision destroyed her career. And for 22 years, the world believed another person had created her work. After Elena refused the contract, everything changed. Her laboratory access was restricted. Her research assistants were reassigned. Meetings happened without her. Reports disappeared. Then came the accusations. She's difficult. She's emotional. She doesn't understand institutional politics. Elena kept fighting. But every fight cost money. Eventually, the university terminated her position. The official reason was restructuring. Elena knew better. She tried legal action. The foundation hired expensive lawyers. She sold her apartment. She used her savings. She kept going. Then her husband Daniel became sick. He was the only person who never asked her to give up. One night, after another legal hearing, Elena came home exhausted. Daniel made dinner. He burned the chicken. The rice was nearly inedible. Elena laughed for the first time in weeks. Daniel held her hand. They can erase your name from a document, he told her. But they can't erase what you did. Years later, Daniel died. Elena lost the house. She moved into a tiny apartment. She stopped talking about the research, but she never stopped helping people. She volunteered at community clinics. She helped patients complete medical forms. She gave away what little knowledge she had. She believed medicine belonged to everyone. And tonight, that belief had brought her back to the place where everything began. A young waitress named Maya had been watching everything. She had seen Victoria pour the drink. She had heard the insults. And she had seen Elena protect the notebook instead of herself. Maya stepped forward. I saw what happened. Victoria turned. Nobody asked you. Maya's hands shook. But she continued. She didn't cause trouble. Victoria's voice became sharp. Go back to work. Maya looked toward Adrian. Then Elena. Then the room. I can't. The ballroom went silent. Maya continued. I've worked here for 2 years. I've watched people get treated differently because of how they dress. Victoria's face tightened. This is absurd. No, Maya said. What's absurd is that nobody wanted to check her invitation. Another employee stepped forward. Then another. A security guard spoke. I was told not to question Victoria's decisions. A receptionist added. She told us certain guests should be moved away from the front tables. Victoria stared at them. You are all lying. A retired nurse near the stage stood. I have a complaint from 3 years ago. Then a former employee raised her hand. I have one too. Suddenly, Elena wasn't standing alone anymore. The truth was becoming bigger than her. Adrian looked at the foundation president. How many complaints have been filed? Marcus hesitated. I don't know. A young receptionist spoke. I do. Everyone turned. She held a small flash drive. I was told to archive complaints that could damage the foundation's reputation. Marcus stared at her. What did you do? I saved copies. A murmur moved through the room. Victoria stepped forward. You stole confidential information. The receptionist shook her head. I protected it. Adrian looked at Elena. Elena said nothing. She didn't need to. The receptionist handed the drive to a lawyer who had been standing near the entrance. His name was Daniel Price. He had arrived quietly after receiving Elena's message earlier that day. He opened his case. I was waiting for the right moment. Marcus looked nervous. Who are you? Daniel answered. Her attorney. He placed a thick folder on the table. The court has already reviewed the research records. Marcus's face changed. What court? The federal court. Daniel looked around the ballroom. The ruling was issued this afternoon. Elena had not come simply to attend a gala. She had come because the legal battle was already over. And she had won. Daniel opened the folder. The court determined that the original research rights were obtained through fraudulent authorship documents. Nobody moved. He continued. The foundation did not legally own exclusive control of the protocol. Marcus stared at him. That's impossible. It's already been decided. Adrian asked, what does that mean? Daniel answered, Dr. Carter controls future licensing rights connected to the original protocol. The room erupted. Board members began whispering. The billion-dollar partnership suddenly hung in the balance. Adrian looked at Elena. Is that why you came tonight? Elena nodded. Partly. What's the other reason? She looked at the employees standing near the wall. To make sure the people who were ignored for years finally get heard. Daniel added another document. The ruling also found evidence that research records were altered. A board member whispered, Richard Grant. Elena shook her head. Not only him. Everyone looked at Marcus. Elena continued. People knew. The room became quiet again. Some signed papers. Some stayed silent. Some benefited. And some were afraid. She looked around. I don't want revenge. Victoria looked surprised. Then what do you want? Elena answered. Accountability. Adrian's assistant approached. Sir, the investment agreement is ready. Adrian didn't take it. Instead, he looked at Elena. What would happen if I signed? The foundation would receive the money. And if I don't? The expansion stops. Marcus quickly stepped forward. Mr. Cole, thousands of patients could benefit from this investment. Elena looked at him. Don't use patience to protect your reputation. Marcus became silent. Adrian nodded. She's right. Marcus stared at him. You would risk a billion-dollar medical expansion? Adrian answered calmly. I would risk $1 billion before I risk rewarding an institution that refuses accountability. The room went silent. Victoria finally understood. The woman she had humiliated wasn't asking Adrian to save her. She had already won. Adrian was simply choosing whether to stand beside the truth. He turned toward Elena. What conditions would you require? Elena thought for a moment. Independent oversight. Adrian nodded. Continue. Every researcher whose work was erased must receive public credit. Continue. Every employee complaint must be reviewed outside the foundation. Adrian nodded again. And every patient clinic receiving money from this protocol must be accessible to people who cannot afford private care. Marcus looked horrified. That could cost millions. Elena looked at him. Then perhaps the foundation should have thought about that before making millions from stolen work. Victoria had been silent for several minutes. Now she stepped forward. I didn't know. Elena looked at her. Victoria swallowed. I didn't know who you were. Elena answered quietly. Would you have treated me differently if you had known? Victoria couldn't answer. Adrian looked at her. That's the question. Victoria's eyes filled. I thought she was trying to get inside. You never checked. I was protecting the event. You humiliated her. I made a mistake. Elena looked at the red stain on her coat. Yes. Victoria lowered her head. Can you forgive me? Elena remained silent. Everyone waited. Finally she said, forgiveness doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen. Victoria looked up. Then what does it mean? It means I won't let what you did turn me into someone who needs to hurt you back. Victoria began crying. Elena continued. But you still have to face the consequences. The words were calm. No screaming. No revenge. Just accountability. Daniel quietly closed the legal folder. The foundation board had a decision to make. And for the first time in its history, the people who usually made every decision were no longer in control. One board member stood. His name was Harold Benson. He had served for 11 years. I resign from the executive committee. Marcus stared at him. What are you doing? Harold removed his foundation pin. I believed we were helping people. He looked at Elena. I was wrong about what was happening inside these walls. Another director stood. Then another. Soon, half the board members were demanding an independent investigation. Marcus tried to stop them. We cannot destroy the foundation over one incident. Adrian corrected him. This isn't one incident. He pointed toward the employees. It's a pattern. The receptionist raised the flash drive. There are hundreds of complaints. A former researcher stepped forward. There are research disputes too. Another employee said. And harassment complaints. Daniel began recording names. Elena listened. She realized something. The sealed envelope she had carried for 22 years had opened more than her own case. It had opened the doors for everyone else. She looked toward Maya, the young waitress. Maya was crying. Elena smiled. You did the right thing. Maya shook her head. I was scared. So was I. Maya looked surprised. Elena continued. Courage doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you decide something else matters more. Maya smiled through her tears. The room had changed. Adrian stepped toward Elena. You could own this entire foundation. Elena shook her head. I don't want it. You could demand millions. I want the research funded. You could destroy the people who hurt you. Elena looked at Victoria. I don't want that either. Adrian studied her. Then what do you want? Elena looked through the glass doors. Outside, the rain had stopped. I want a clinic. Adrian blinked. A clinic. For adults who can't afford treatment. She continued. A place where nobody needs a title before they are treated with respect. Adrian smiled. How much? Elena laughed softly. You really think money solves everything? No. He looked at her. But sometimes it helps. For the first time that night, Elena smiled fully. Then help. Adrian nodded. I will. Daniel placed the final agreement in front of her. One signature. Elena looked at the paper. 22 years earlier, she had refused to sign a lie. Tonight, she was signing the truth. Her name moved slowly across the page. Elena Carter. No title. No disguise. No stolen credit. Just her name. When she finished, she put the pen down. The room erupted in applause. But Elena didn't look at the crowd. She looked at Maya and smiled. 6 months later, the same hotel ballroom looked completely different. The chandeliers still hung from the ceiling. The marble floor had been polished. The walls still reflected warm golden light. But the atmosphere had changed. The foundation now operated under independent oversight. Every complaint was reviewed by an outside committee. Employees could report misconduct without going through management. Researchers were publicly credited. And the treatment Elena had created funded clinics across the city. At the entrance, a small bronze plaque had been installed. It read, Dignity does not require permission. Elena had requested those words. She didn't want a statue. She didn't want a giant photograph. She wanted a reminder, because she knew institutions could change. But people had to keep choosing to change with them. The old reception desk was gone. In its place stood a simple information counter. Nobody was asked how much money they had before receiving help. Nobody was judged by their clothes. Nobody was sent outside because they looked poor. And the first person hired to oversee visitor dignity was Maya. She still remembered that night, especially the moment she finally spoke. The research hall now contained a large wall of names. Not just Elena, every technician, every nurse, every researcher, every assistant, every person whose work had contributed to the breakthrough. For years, history had remembered only one man. Now the truth was visible. Elena's name appeared first, but she insisted that every name be the same size. A reporter once asked her why. She answered, "Because nobody works alone." Dr. Samuel Brooks stood beside her during the unveiling. He had tears in his eyes. "I should have spoken sooner." Elena looked at him. "You spoke when it mattered. I wish I'd been braver." "So do I." They laughed quietly. Adrian stood nearby. He had funded the clinic. But Elena refused to let anyone call it Adrian Cole's clinic. His official name was the Elena Carter Community Health Center. It wasn't a palace. There were no crystal chandeliers, no velvet ropes, no exclusive entrance. Just warm rooms, doctors, nurses, volunteers, and people who needed help. Exactly what Elena had wanted. A place where nobody had to prove they mattered. One winter morning, Adrian arrived at the clinic carrying a small wooden box. Elena was organizing medical files. "What is that?" "Something that belongs to you." She opened the box. Inside was the silver pin. The edge had been repaired. The scratches remained. Adrian had refused to polish them away. "I wanted it to keep its history," he said. Elena touched it. "You kept it all these years?" "I found it the night I met you." Elena smiled. "You didn't meet me that night." Adrian looked confused. "I knew you before that." She shook her head. "You knew my work." He smiled. "Fair enough." He handed her the pin. Elena attached it to her canvas bag. The same bag she had carried into the hotel. The same bag Victoria had mocked. The same bag that had protected the notebook. Now the silver symbol shone beneath the clinic lights. Adrian looked at it. 22 years. Elena nodded. A long time. Was it worth fighting? She thought about it. Then she looked through the clinic doors. Patients were arriving. Volunteers were helping them. Maya was greeting families. Elena smiled. Yes. Years later, people would remember Adrian Cole. They would remember the billion-dollar investment. They would remember the court ruling. They would remember the scandal at the Grand Belmont Hotel. But Elena remembered something else. She remembered the moment Maya stepped forward. The moment Daniel checked the facts. The moment the receptionist saved the complaints. The moment employees stopped whispering. The moment people realized silence was also a choice. Because the biggest victory wasn't that Elena became wealthy. She didn't. It wasn't that Victoria lost her position. She did. It wasn't even that the foundation finally admitted the truth. It had to. The real victory was that one woman who had been treated as invisible reminded an entire institution that dignity comes before status. Elena never forgot the punch soaking her coat. But she also never forgot what happened afterward. A stranger stood beside her. Then another. Then another. Until she was no longer alone. That's how change begins. Not with millions of dollars. Not with powerful names. Sometimes it begins with one ordinary person saying, "That's not right," and refusing to look away. One evening, Elena stood outside the clinic waiting for the bus. Adrian offered to drive her home. She smiled. "I like the bus." He laughed. "I knew you'd say that." Snow began falling softly. The clinic windows glowed behind them. Inside, Maya was helping a patient. Daniel was reviewing legal documents. Doctors were still treating people. And on the wall, Elena's name stood beside the names of everyone who had been forgotten. Adrian looked at the silver pin on her bag. "Do you ever wish you had taken the deal 22 years ago?" Elena thought about it. "No. Not even once? Maybe when I was sitting in that tiny apartment eating noodles for dinner. Adrian laughed. She smiled. But if I had signed, I might have become comfortable. And I might have stopped fighting. The bus arrived. Elena stepped toward it. Then she turned back. Adrian. Yes. Never decide someone's worth before you know their story. He nodded. She boarded the bus. The doors closed. And as it disappeared into the snowy street, the silver pin caught one final reflection of the clinic lights. The woman they once told didn't belong had built a place where everyone did. And perhaps that's the greatest kind of justice. Not making powerful people afraid of you. Making sure ordinary people never have to beg powerful people for dignity again. If this story touched you, tell me in the comments. Would you have spoken up when everyone else stayed silent? And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories of truth, courage, and unexpected justice.